This is National Chess Master Rats at chess.com to continue my series of the games in the team match between my video lessons group and Carpe Diem. And this was played on board 76, kind of like 1800 player range. Let's have a look at this game. It starts out with an English with one of the F5 systems for black. John Watson, International Master John Watson, wrote an excellent 4-volume set on the English. It was published back 79 to 81. It's an English descriptive notation. If you can find it, it's worth a lot. He's one of the few authors that actually goes out and explains a lot of ideas and suggests things to try. Of course, the analysis is older. There have been a lot of improvements since then, but it's a great book if you're an English player, or a great 4-volume set. If you look for it, you can find it. Okay, so far not much is happening, but here's one of these fundamental mistakes that I see happen many times in games. Let's look at it, then we'll talk about it. Okay, first off, we'll talk about it first. First off, White hasn't completed his development. Okay, neither has Black. The entire Black queen side is sitting at home, and most of the White queen side is sitting at home. But they've taken care of business and gotten their king's castle to safety. So naturally, it suggests the next step is to try to activate these queen side pieces. Now, what kind of plan could White run? Well, with this formation, what Black is saying is he'd eventually like to attack on the king side. And why not? You know, that's where the king is. Let's get a checkmate. But it's also kind of set up that White's saying, I'm playing on the queen side here. I want to play on the queen side. So maybe White should continue with a queen side plan and just wait developments, okay? Well, what happens is, just watch what happens, and we'll explain it. Okay, White moves a piece a second time in the opening before everything's completed. And Black goes back, and White goes here. Now, this is when I run into the same thing with my students when they move a piece one place and put it back. Now, let's compare the positions. Here it's Black to move. Now let's click right back to when Black castled and it was White's move. We're gonna wiggle waggle back and forth here. Do you see the difference? The only difference is the Black pawn has advanced to h6. That's the only difference in the position. The other difference is here it's White's move, and here it's Black's move. So in effect, what Black is saying, or White is saying, I'll tell you what, it's my move here, but I'm going to make you a deal. If you will push your rook pawn up to h6, I'll give you a second move right now. I won't even move. You get two moves right now, but one of them has to be h6. Now, more often than not, Black is going to oblige, right? Right? I think so. And in this case, Black obliges with knight c6, and that's what Black has gained. Now, g6 is a little weaker, but you know that pawn is maybe coming up here anyway if Black attacks on the king side. Okay, so there was one time in one of my games where I did this. I had my bishop go from one square to another to attack a pawn. Black had a pawn, White had a pawn chain, something like this. And I wanted him to advance the pawn to chase my bishop out. So I gave him two free moves, but it accomplished a great deal in the position. But I don't think White has accomplished anything by giving Black two free moves, okay? So now he plays a3 along the lines I was suggesting. And Black goes about his business developing. And now suddenly Black finds a tactic. You wouldn't think this b pawn would be under pressure, but it is, even though there's three pieces between. These are relatively easy to clear. Now, was Black too quick in this? We'll talk about that when we get there. Okay, first thing, e4. Now that puts the pressure on the knight. Okay, White chooses to capture, and then Black takes back with his knight. Now, this path is becoming a little clearer, okay? White goes ahead and chooses to take this, even though it's going to cost him a pawn. Black gets this pawn, and black slides his bishop back. So, for what it's worth, black has won a pawn. But did black win this pawn too early? Way back when I was talking about the two free moves for black, I mentioned the black queen side hadn't been developed. Only one piece has come out, and that came out on that free move that black got. Is it too early to be winning a pawn? Well, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. Every position is different. White really doesn't have anything to show in compensation for the pawn. His knight is back on e1, blocking his rook in. The bishop on g2 and the bishop on d2 have a little bit of scope. They're both attacking a pawn. They're tying black pieces down. But the rook on a2 isn't really doing much. Now, white has maybe some compensation for the pawn, a little more boardroom. And I think a lot of the attack black may have been trying to muster up on the king side has been dissipated. But black has won a pawn. So white has to play actively. Okay, pressure on the pawn, guards it. There's also pressure on b7. So I think white's doing well here. Got to get the knight into play so you can get the rook into play. Black has to stop and secure that b6 pawn. It might be too risky to open up this diagonal. This can get very dangerous, and especially weakening the knight on c6. But black's trying to ride out his pawn plus. Okay. Now this puts new pressure on a pawn on a6, closes the b file down. Black goes ahead and makes a threat. His threat is a discovery, attacking the queen and attacking the bishop with two different men. Black breaks that, or white breaks that. Black plays a6, stopping the pressure here. And now black decides his rook's better placed on the d file, so he moves it. White opposes. And then black starts setting up a pin. There's a pin on this pawn on c4. And now he increases the pressure. And bang. The attrition on c4 is going to be too great for white to bear. Doing this did weaken the pawn on a6. It also weakened the c6 square. And these will come into play here in a few moves when we talk about it a little further. Black goes ahead and grabs his pawn. He's now up 2 pawns, but white has some pressure on a6. Now, here's where I think black may have so-called or dropped the ball. I think b4 or d5 is a good move. The reason I say that, it anchors this bishop in on c4. That bishop is there for the duration. Anytime white liquidates it with his bishop, if he can be so lucky, black's going to end up with an advanced protected pass pawn. White's doubled on the c file, and that file is completely taken out of his hands. You're going to drop back the pawn on a6. You can't do much with your c6 pawn, or c7 pawn, but the b4 pawn is a potential target. And I think if black does that, he's doing fine. Instead, he gets his king off to the side, where I don't really know why I needed to go there. Black had control of this diagonal, and white's not pressuring g6 in any way, shape, or form. White grabs the pawn back, and here I still think he should go for d5. But I was talking about a6 and c6 being weak, and a6 has fallen, and c6 is now occupied, and it means something because I think white's next move caught black by surprise. Black's happy here. He's a pawn up. He's got 6 pawns. White has 5. But white comes up with a very good move here. He gives up the exchange, or the quality as is known in Europe. And in doing so, suddenly the white bishops are going to start springing to life. And now white's able to utilize this c file that when I had suggested earlier, if he slams it shut with d5, white could never occupy. So I think white has full compensation, at least for the material he's given up here. And immediately picks up 1 pawn back. And look at those bishops. They've sprung to life. And even though black's getting the queens off, I think white's got pretty close to full compensation. We'll talk about it here briefly at the end. It's going to end here real quick. It dissipate into a drawn position. Black elects to play rook takes, and we'll see to draw by virtue of having bishop opposite colors. But did black need to do that? Did black need to give this up? Maybe just wanted the game over. What if you take the pawn? Okay. Now, there's a great book written, I call it part of the Averbach series, written by Grandmaster Yuri Averbach. He co-authored or was the chief writer on 7 of the 8 volumes, covering all the piece versus piece endings, queen endings, rook endings, pawn endings, knight endings, bishop endings, bishop versus knight endings, rook versus minor piece endings, and queen versus rook or minor piece endings. And in the volume on rook versus minor piece endings, eventually what black would like to do is trade one set of bishops and then see if he can win the ending. Now, that requires research. You're allowed to do that in correspondence chess, but you would probably be in black's best interest to go ahead and try for that. And it's kind of beyond the scope of what I can show here. But immediately, it looks like maybe black can at least get close to that, achieving that. Okay, h5 invites white to trade bishops to save his pawn. White may have some nuisance checks first. Let's see. Like I say, these bishops on an open board can do a lot. Now the question is, does he want to play h5 or does he want to trade bishops? But essentially, if you're playing this game, you would, with black, you look in that ending book and see what the rules are with many pawns on the board, and see what kind of positions you can liquidate down into where the rook can actually beat the bishop. And that's how you proceed. Okay, anyway, I thought there were a few little mistakes here, but I thought overall was well played, and there was some creative chess, more so by white than black in this game. Okay, sorry to my teammate, but his exchange sack was a great game-saving method. Okay. And you had a better chance in there. Okay, bring up the other game, and let's flip the board, see what happens here. Okay, so we're in going into a Dutch stonewall type system. Not quite a stonewall yet. The spawn isn't here. I don't know why white didn't play knight c3, but I guess he doesn't want to deal with double pawns, even though they can get undoubled very easily. Anyway, knight h3. Clearly this knight is headed for f4 at some point. And there he goes, headed for f4. Now, this allows white to get rid of his knight for black's better bishop. So I kind of think white did better on this deal, even though his knight's been busy. 1, 2, 3 moves to take a piece that, well, even though it moved twice, it moved for free on when it went to a7 because it was under tempo. But anyway, black is now left with a bishop behind a wall of pawns. Okay, white grabs some space, but even though white has a dark square bishop and black doesn't, white's dark square bishop is doing very little. Okay. So I'm just kind of going through this. White's picked up some space on the queen side, and black is going through the motions, generating his pieces over on the king side. Now this is an interesting thing. It's not the first move I would look at. I'm not sure if that's wise. It's leaving white with a very bad bishop, although he can probably trade it off for that knight on d6. But the thing that I'm thinking is that what black wants to do is get e5 in and suddenly this bishop springs to life, and maybe black can generate some actual threats against the enemy king. Let's see. White needs to find a move. Well, this bishop's no good. We don't want that knight penetrating. Let's get rid of it. E5. Okay, there's no hurry to take it. It's not going anywhere. So let's see. Of course, we don't have to take it. We're getting this file. If black's going to play for E5, we get that bishop comes into play. So, but then I was doing it with a pawn sacrifice. It could be okay. Let's see. Let's develop. Let's just put this rook on A2. The idea is maybe I'm going to come here. Now E5, sacrifice a pawn. Okay, getting the bishop. You know, you've given up a pawn, but you're activating this bishop. Now we got to find a home for the knight. Where do we want to put it? How about B5? Just, well, B5's not in the way. Okay. Now, white could give the pawn back. Here's the idea of having the knight on B5. We're stopping queen C3. Knight here, we're just kind of having fun here. Chase that guy. Okay. Now I'm getting ready to put my queen on F3 and checkmate you. Oops, that hangs the queen. Sorry. Okay, and I do these one-movers all the time. Well, we'll have to take a more indirect route. Knight here. Knight takes. Bishop takes. Queen there. Queen here. I don't know. You know, it's a game. Looks like white's going to get a very potent pass pawn here. But I mean, you know, just myself. It may be a good move, but it's not the first move I would consider. Does that mean that he's right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and he's wrong? No, it just means it's not the first move I would consider. But he took with the bishop, and black elected to take with. He didn't take with the knight pawn. He took with the knight, keeping his bishop hemmed in. Okay, so now bishop A3 anyway. And now white's going to occupy E5, and that shuts this bishop in. Although, you know, maybe it can still somehow find a way into the game. Of course, this knight on E5 is covering things. Clearly, black is going for broke. He's advancing his pawns, but by doing so, he's trapped his own knight. His knight doesn't have a retreat. So black's made a blunder. And now the game is strategically winning for white. There's not too much more to it. I'm just going to kind of run through it. White's just up a piece, owns the dark squares. Black can't do a thing, and white's just saving the A6 break for when he's ready. He shut down all attack on black's part. Now there's threats on G6. Good move. Deflects the queen from protecting the rook, but Zwischenzug time. And two minor pieces for the rook. Even though black has a pawn compensation, doesn't matter. A6 is coming, and it's too strong. The black pawns are too weak. Black can't do a thing here. Rook A8 is going to be met by knight D7 and knight C5, and eventually that A6 is coming. There's just no defense here. And now with rook B8, knight D7 check, and now the pawn queens. And I don't know why black played on, but I'll just kind of ramble through the moves. And whoops, I hit the wrong button. And here black decided to give up. White doesn't even need the pawn to win this. You know how to mate with a bishop and knight, don't you? I hope you do. I've defended it successfully twice, once against a 1900 rated player and once against a 2200 rated player that did not know how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, look at my playlist. There's a playlist for the kids. I've got all the elementary mates, including bishop versus knight. Kind of a fun little video to watch. I got some stories about the times I've seen people fail to deliver it. Okay, thanks so much for your attention, and I'll make another video as soon as we get some more results in. Take care. Bye now.